So I'm going to call to order the Clackamas County Service District Number 1 Budget Committee meeting today on June 5th and entertain a motion for nominations for the chair.
How do we do this? I'd like to nominate Steve Gashler.
Yes.
Oh, good, thank you.
Is there a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded to nominate Steve Gashler as chair of the CCSD1 Budget Committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Steve, there's the gavel.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Monacle and committee. I would call for a nomination for a secretary.
I moved nominate Michael Monacle for secretary.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Okay. That motion is approved, and Michael will serve as secretary. So with the officers being elected, I think the next order of business is the presentation by Greg and Doug. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This is Greg Geist with Water Environment Services, the director, and I have with me Doug Waugh, our finance manager. I think that Steve and Michael were here at the beginning of my last presentation. Okay, so I'll dispense with the broad stuff. Just to reiterate, we would propose to go from 105 to 106 FTE overall for WES. With respect to Clackamas County Service District Number 1, some of the highlights there, we're going to be really focused this year on planning and construction of solids handling capital investments and the refurbishment of the Kellogg Creek wastewater or water resource recovery facility. We're looking at a $12 to $15 million pretty significant refurbishment at Kellogg. Right now, our current working estimate for our solids handling project at the Tri-City facility is about $37.5 million, with CCSD number 1 picking up 64% of that cost, which is based on projected use there. On the surface water side of things, we have a pretty exciting project that's going to hopefully kick off later this summer called our Carley Creek Restoration Project. It's, Carley Creek drains, enters the Clackamas River in the lower stretch. It drains the industrial area in the Clackamas industrial area, and we're going to take about 400 acres of industrial land that is currently just being piped into Carley Creek and into Clackamas and divert it through a treatment works. It's going to be several acres. It's going to be a multi-million-dollar project. We think it's going to have a significant impact on water quality and be a great way to connect with the community. Lots of opportunities for that. We are seeing significant growth in the district, mostly in Happy Valley. Planning for that. What else did I want to say? I mentioned Carley. I guess I'll get straight to the chase. As with the Water Environment Services budget, we're asking for a 3% rate increase for sewer services, sanitary sewer services. That would be $1.35 per month per household, going from $45 to $46.35 per household per month. Interestingly enough, when you may look at the West sanitary budget and say, well, why the heck are you charging them, $22.15 and you want to charge us $46.35? One is a wholesale, one is a retail. So of that $46.35, a significant portion of that is the debt that we talked about that CCSD number 1 took out to build the pipeline, the force main, and the the treatment works on the Tri-City campus. So if you pull out that debt from that $46.35, as well as the about $8 that we charge per month for the retail service, they're virtually identical. So for a wholesale treatment standpoint, it's about $22 a month, whether you're in CCSD number 1 or in the the West Service District. It's just we do more in CCSD number 1, and we have that debt that we're paying for. As far as the Surface water rate, we're again looking for a 3% adjustment there. That's 20 cents per household per month from 650 to 670. And then also, as we talked about, right-of-way fees, the city of Happy Valley has initiated a right-of-way fee, and based on 5% of gross revenue, that equates to $2.32 per household per month as a city franchise fee. And with that, I'll hand it over to Doug.
Again, I think you saw the presentation that we went through before, so I can just step to the end of this one too and get to your questions and comments if that would be of use to you guys.
Actually, real quick, like I did last time, I wanted to quickly touch on SDCs. So for CCSD number 1, the system development charges, those are, if a house is built or a business comes into the district, we charge them for the capital needs to serve them. For this budget year, we're looking at, that's about 16, almost 17% of our revenues for the year. We are proposing to increase that SDC from $6,950 to $7,140, a rate increase of 2.7%, which is the inflation index, and that was a recommendation by the River Health Advisory Committee from about 2 years ago that we continue to ratchet that up with inflation. But like I said, we are going to be looking at revisiting our SDCs once we have our collection system master plan results in, as well as some additional condition assessments, so we have a better picture of not just what we need to build for growth, but what we need to build for replacement of assets and capacity in our collection system. So that's that.
Okay, I'll just add a few details to what Greg was talking about. If you take a look at your District 1 budget this year, you'll see again a big increase in what's called special payments. It's $56.9 million, and that's just money that we're not spending. It's money we're moving from Service District 1 into Water Environment Services. So again, it's pretty much a status quo budget. This is just money, we're just moving that money over, not looking to spend it right away.
What
It
line
represents-
item, where is that? Here, I'm just
Well, you'll
trying
see it in a couple of different places.
That was my big question, and
Yeah, I'm
got
just trying-
answered in
I'm
the
just-
last presentation.
I know, but I just want to know where it is in the place, because it's answered, but I haven't.
If you,
172?
Page, hang on.
if you
It's on
flip back
page
to,
74.
172 is
yes,
another one.
74,
and 122.
75, you can see it in there.
Down near the bottom on the right-hand side.
Okay, the number is 56.
That's it.
56
Got it.
million, right.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, got it. And, right, so that's transferring reserves over for future use by the district. We are looking at, as Greg mentioned, at higher growth rates. We took a new look at our population projections, and those are coming back to us as showing really steady, very, very solid growth. So we're anticipating much higher SDC revenue next year, $2.9 million in additional SDC revenue, if you will. And that's based on the recommended increase in the SDC that we'll be bringing forward to you at the end of this month. We're adding one new position in our surface water division, a surface water technician, in recognition of the fact that we are upping our game, if you will, in our surface water area, and doing a lot more work and getting our maintenance plan up to speed and doing a lot of good things out there. We're continuing our design and planning work for the solids handling piece. We are looking at increasing our capital outlay by almost 50% next year. And that includes getting the solids handling work further down the road, if you will, as well as the Kellogg improvements that Greg mentioned a little earlier. The only other thing I would mention is that the rate adjustments all across the board are 3% once again. And we're looking at leaving the surface water STC at $205 with the increases Greg noted in the surface or in the sanitary sewer STC. So those are the quick points I wanted to make on the District 1 budget, and look to your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg and Doug. At this point of the meeting, we will open it to,
Question over here, Michael.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's a question now or question after we have comments.
the.
We have a series of, okay, yeah, it's true. I've got a whole series of things to go
Well,
through.
Michael, why don't you wait, and let's see if there's any public testimony, and then we'll come back to the, any questions the committee may have. So if there's anybody in the audience that would like to come forward and offer any testimony concerning this budget, now is the time.
One at a time, please.
Form a line, form a line.
So we're not seeing anybody here today that wishes to speak to us about this budget. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion, and we will open it to discussion and questions amongst the committee. And Michael has already expressed his interest. So Michael, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm going to try to represent the multitude of people who are not here today to ask some questions. And a lot of these I kind of know the answer, but I've got an ongoing gripe that I'll get to eventually. I look at page 74 and we look at the actual 2014, 2015 budget. It's 87. We jump 3 years later. It's 133. That is a 50% increase in 3 years. Now, understand there's a lot of juggling going on here that isn't shown in these numbers, but this is a very scary number for me, and it goes into my next point is back on page 3, we talked that there is a O&M budget increase of 2.6. Now that seems reasonable and understandable, and I don't have any questions about that. But then I go to the next page and you're making a recommendation of 3%. And why or whatever, I can come up with all sorts of reasons that would justify that, but I don't see it in black and white here, easily to understand. And I'm not even griping about it. I had a discussion with Greg and we agree this is a very reasonable budget, it appears to be. But as a citizen member being notified a couple weeks ago about the meeting, getting this document by email and online, I don't really have the time and resources to do this due diligence in that short period of time.
Understood.
And so one of my ongoing pleas is to have more time, better resources. When I was with Tri-City, we were getting emails, and I actually showed up at a couple meetings, not as many as I could have, but I think if we're going to keep this form of budget committee, that we need to be involved year-round, or at least have
Agree.
the opportunity. Okay.
I agree.
Also understand you may have some other issues going on as far as opportunities on, matter of fact, I'm not sure what the budget committee is going to look like next year with only one district. So we don't know who survives or who retires. So that's a couple of things. I wanted to comment on something that the chair was talking about I&I, and you were making a point about this is a big issue. It's always been a big issue. It always will be a big issue. I'm not sure the ratepayers should be looking at a large capital increase to pay for what in Happy Valley has always been your lines. And I'm not sure there's ever been anybody else responsible for I&I, which is supposedly what those fees that we've been paid over the years were for.
Can I just address that real quick? So we don't know exactly where our I&I, that we're in the process of doing the collection system master plan now. We did storm event monitoring. We had flow monitors throughout the system. I will say that the Happy Valley area, I mean, it's newer pipe, so theoretically they should not have I&I problems, whereas frankly, the unincorporated urbanized portion of Clackamas County has been there for a while. So intuitively, you would think older pipe may leak more. I will say that anecdotally, based on our field crews, it does look like we have more I&I coming from Happy Valley than we would expect. That could be a single point of input, a pipe that's along a stream bed that has a leaky manhole, or we're gonna figure that out. But you're right. The idea that well, neither Tri-City nor CCSD number 1, when they came into being, this was not envisioned. And so there was never any kind of groundwork laid for how the service district as a wholesale provider would interact with the cities in that case from an I&I standpoint. So of course we have a vested interest. We don't want to have to build treatment capacity, pay for people, pay for chemicals, pay for electricity to treat essentially rainwater. And so we have a vested interest to work with those cities to get it out of the system at the source. We just don't have, at this point, a vehicle to do that, an agreement. And that's something that we need to work on.
Well, I know, I haven't been in West Lynn for a few years. I know they just recently, well, the last 2 years, implemented a lining program,
Right.
which should go a great deal. And I'm happy to hear Happy Valley I&I is likely not so bad, since I helped design a good portion of it. So, just a comment on I&I is, we need to make the best use of the resources we've been handed over the last 30, 40 years, and hopefully have a good plan going forward. And you're talking about the master plan, that's one of my other ongoing gripes, is that, 30 years ago, I had to maintain a master plan for 5 installations, and I don't understand why we can't keep a current master plan, a current 5-year budget, because I don't have the resources as a citizen committee of this, for the budget, to really say yay or nay. And I have the greatest respect for your team and your employees, but as a citizen representative, it's the term, the fox watching the hen house comes to mind, is that you ask for the money, we give you the money, you ask for the money, we give you the money, without a clear understanding of what we're buying. Now, I think we're getting a great deal. No criticism, but I would like better information for the budget committee members to actually see what we're getting as representatives of the public.
Right. I will say, the last time the collection system master plan was updated for the Tri-City District was, I believe, 1999. And in 2009 for CCSD number 1. In addition, many times traditionally, those master plans are simply looking at growth. They're not looking at condition. The one that we're doing now looks at both the need for capacity upgrades as well as the condition of the pipes. That does take longer. It's a little bit more expensive, but we think it's a good investment. And building on something that we can more easily morph as we move forward. So it's not a huge multi-$100,000 project that we do once every, ideally 5 to, and in some cases much longer period of time. But if we have something that we can develop that's comprehensive, that looks at both asset condition and capacity, that is something that we can probably care and feed for some number of years before we have to do a complete revamp.
Thank you, Michael. Commissioner Savas had some comments.
Yeah, I want to, Greg, I'm not exactly sure about all the bond instruments that we have out there, and Doug's been around a long time, so maybe he can answer the question, but what I'm really trying to get at is trying to understand if any of the existing infrastructure that we have built, CCSD District 1 has built, that might still have debt service on it, we saw debt service, is subject to any of the right-of-way fee lines.
I don't know.
In 2002, we issued some debt to finance an improvement district in Happy Valley, and we are still paying some of that debt today, so.
My concern would be, again, on behalf of the ratepayers of the district, that they might be paying twice for essentially really the same thing, which actually the city did not incur the cost, right? But they'll be collecting the revenue for something of which the ratepayers in the district and the county participated both in building the road and building the infrastructure. And I'm not even sure, if I pose that same question to DTD, if there's any indebtedness in that joint transportation system development charge area. So my concern again is on behalf of the ratepayers in that area, that they're not paying twice for that. Also realizing that unlike Tri-City Service District, these are relatively new facilities, relatively watertight facilities. I understand that we have some unknown I&I, and that could be obviously somewhere else in the system, but that's not new. We have to get to the bottom of that. But I'm kind of wondering that, realizing that's all new, I'm presuming that the right-of-way, if it's a county road, that's not the city's right-of-way?
Correct.
Is that a fair presumption?
Correct.
So therefore, I'm wondering what those, and you can't really ask that, but my concern is that where the city's collecting, let's say, the 5%, what will those revenues be used for, knowing that the infrastructure is relatively new, as is the roadbed, right? And granted, cost recovery for any digs or any road work, there's revenues to fix that. But I guess what I'm kind of wondering is that if there is an I&I expenditure, let's say whatever the source is for this I&I, is that something that the city is going to dedicate towards? Or is that the district going to pick it up and yet still be charged for the right-of-way fee? It seems like the ratepayers are not getting, possibly, may not get a fair shake at this.
Right. If we did I&I work in Happy Valley tomorrow, we would, the district as a whole would pick up those expenses.
And yet not be reimbursed by the right-of-way fee.
Correct.
That's my concern. It just does not seem to be fair.
Right. So the right-of-way fee would go to, Commissioner Humberson mentioned, the oversight of, the permit, the staff that it takes to issue the permit, the inspection staff that come to make sure that we built the road back to their standards. That's what they say that they would spend that right-of-way fee on. Right. Whether $2.70-something per household per month, that's a lot of revenue.
So you don't have to pay city permit fees when you do that anymore?
Oh, we do, absolutely.
That's a double dip.
Or a triple dip.
Or triple dip, right? Yeah.
That was my
So
whole
that's
point
doing
on
the
that.
work on their benefit, right?
Charge us for our own pipes.
But like I said, the cities have been pretty open that, it was measures 5 and 50 that traditionally limited their ability to generate revenue, and they simply see this as a way to help with that.
And I guess, as a question on that, these fees are based on a percentage of our billings to them, right?
Percentage of
So
gross
it's not
revenue.
a length of line, so
Depends.
if we have so many thousand feet of line in their roads, they could pay X amount per foot. But as somebody demonstrated earlier, that difference can be pretty horrendous.
Right.
Between a couple dollars to $20. The question I have, doesn't there have to be a nexus? And I guess it's.
No, not really.
That's what we were asking for. So there is, and I'm most familiar with Oregon cities. I haven't studied Gladstone's, although it was literally written by the same individual that wrote Oregon cities, and I assume it's substantially similar, and Happy Valley's is probably too. There is a minimum charge of something like $15,000 per year. So theoretically, they could charge us that. But right now, it doesn't matter if we have 1 foot of pipe in their right-of-way or 10 miles. It's 5% of gross revenue. And in our testimony, we were simply asking for some kind of accountability, some kind of rationale for charging that
Is this the
fee.
same deal that they offer to AT&T or any of the other franchise utilities?
I believe so. I think it is
Because-
considered. The part that's new is that historically, I don't know if it was a general person's agreement or what, but cities did not charge fellow
Correct.
public entities that were providing a vital public service the same way that they would charge a phone company or a cable company, right?
Right, but
But
as I remember seeing some of the charters, the phone companies, they pretty much just pay a fixed fee per year regardless of what they bill or what they get.
I'm not certain myself with respect to telephone utilities, but my understanding is that the charge that the cities do charge for the right-of-way, the 5% or the 6% in the case of, say, a place like Oregon City, was intended to apply to both public and private utilities uniformly.
That's correct. So it's the same statute. And so, and it applies to the revenue collected within the boundaries of that city. So I believe that they would go to PGE or whomever and say, okay, 5% of the gross revenue generated within the boundaries of the city, whether they had, regardless of the amount of infrastructure that they actually have within the city.
Commissioner Savas, did you,
Oh, I'm
did
sorry.
you have any?
No, I was
Okay,
done. Sorry.
Anybody else have anything?
I'm good to go.
Okay, I just had a couple of things I wanted to say real quick. One, I wanted to thank you, Greg, and you, Doug, both, and all your staff for all the work you do. It's hard and dirty work sometimes, and we all do appreciate that, so. I did come in and sit down with Doug last week and went over some of the questions I had, and I appreciate that, and that helps a lot. I do agree with Michael, though, it's tough to, be here 1 year and then come back 365 days later and pick that up with no really much contact in between. So I hopefully we can put our heads together and figure out a better way to do this, to have the involvement of the committee members. I appreciate your move and all the work you're doing for the consolidation. I know it's been a long, hard-fought battle, and there's a lot of scars and dead body parts and stuff along the way. So thank you for hanging in there, and the rest of the county staff and the commissioners we have now. I know some of you have been through that, or if you haven't, you've heard about it. So I think it is the future. I think it's the best thing for the region, the ratepayers, and so I'm happy that's going that way. My only concern is still the SDC issue. We've got a study that we did back in 2013, and it had a methodology, and it came up with a fee of about $13,000 per EDU, and we're charging about half of that. We're going through a lot of growth right now, so there's a lot of dollars we're not picking up, and I know what happens when we don't pick them up is that that's going to be passed along to the existing ratepayers at some point in time. And as one existing ratepayer, I strongly, and you've heard me say, I believe that growth should pay for growth. And I think we're not doing our existing ratepayers any favor by not charging either the full amount of the SDC or a lot closer to it than what we're doing. And Doug and I had a nice long discussion about that, and we reached I understand where he's at and he understands where I'm at. So with that said, if you want to comment any more with that SDC, I know you've talked about it some and you guys are bringing it up, but it's just an inflationary piece and it really doesn't pick up what we're leaving on the table. And those capacity and reinvestment issues are looming over our heads, and they are coming. So that's all I have.
And I would just say that in response to that, it's an issue. It's an issue that we need to tackle. I do want to make sure that we have a full picture. Now that we are forming this 190, we have a path forward that we can count on as far as a collective investment in the infrastructure. Before, it was very difficult to put even a 5-year capital plan together if any of those projects might require cooperation between the two districts. Now that we have or will have this umbrella organization and a certainty, we can do that. And so the other pieces to that puzzle are, what are our needs? And I think the collection system master plan that we're doing right now, both for future capacity as well as condition assessment, that's going to be a huge piece of that puzzle. The original, back in 2013, the SDC, the capital plan was heavily weighted towards what we needed to build for growth. And I think that we are going to have a little bit different picture moving forward. I think asset replacement is going to be a significant portion of what our long-term capital needs are going to be. And that I think we need to have that in place before we have a conversation about SDCs. And then we'll put it through the same formula and bring it to the board and have that conversation.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And with that, I'll call for a motion.
I've got just a couple more questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Steve, you kind of sparked kind of broached something there I want to speak to a little bit. And one of that being the committee and having the committee members more involved as opposed to just once a year and trying to get yourselves up to speed. And that's something I've advocated in my former capacity as a liaison in that future. And I will continue in my role as a commissioner to have a broader representation of the citizens versus really some of the jurisdictions. It doesn't make much sense to have just the jurisdictions and not the citizens, because the citizens are the ones that are actually paying the bill. But I thought I would take that opportunity to share that and expand on that with my colleagues here present. The second thing on the SDCs, I didn't support the budget last year for CCSD one in Wes or both, or I forgot what it was exactly, but because of this very issue, and it's not, I think the budget's a good budget, but it was the SDCs I had an issue with, and I raised that. My hope was that we indeed got on path, and I share Greg's approach as far as getting a grip, but of what our capital needs are and where we're going. But I think some of the obvious, we know it's cost a lot of money. We know we're under collecting, and we know that we can't afford to actually collect 100% and get 100% recovery. But the irony here is, and in the political landscape is such that, if we take the city of Happy Valley, for example, who is feeling that their park SDC is, they're not getting the bang for the buck and is collecting X amount, well, it's almost equivalent to what the sewer SDC is. But the difference is that we have $100-something million of debt service, right? Of debt, bond debt, and we're under collecting in a large way. And I'm not suggesting that we're over collecting on parks, but the same token is that it seems to be that it's now, a focus, the parks SDCs. While this is a sewer issue, if we're under collecting and the city is not advocating for getting a little bit more recovery for that debt and spreading the burden where it's insufficient, and yet taking the SDCs where it's of benefit, in the same area, and they're almost equivalent in the cost. I think if I live in the city of Happy Valley or in the district, the Parks District, or even this district, that I think having some equity in that sense, that the value that they're collecting and the value that they're paying is getting something. And I know that, and I don't want to get off task here, but if our planning department is more aggressive on saying, hey, you're inside the district, you're not inside the city, but we're more aggressive about utilizing that park SDC, let's say, for building parks, and the city is not so aggressive, then the unincorporated area will get more parks, and the city will get less parks. So, if you want to look at it from that aspect, it's different. But here in the sewer world is that we need more capacity. One area is growing. They're both areas, both incorporated and unincorporated, are growing. And we're annexing in more property, so there's more growth needed. I think we got to realize that this recovery and the SDC rate is somewhere back in the realm of being reasonable across the board. And part of that is to factor in some of the other SDCs, even though they're not related, but I think it's a factor. And that we have to anticipate, and it's not fair for the people, as with the right-of-way fee, to pay for something, have debt, you're part of the original base, and then you're paying again, the double pay or the triple dipping or double dipping. I think that is something that we have a responsibility to be cognizant of and to do the best we can on behalf of them. But I think there's enough evidence out there and enough obvious expense out there that we know that the SDC is inadequate.
I think that's fair to say. And I think, well, it depends on what you mean by inadequate. But yeah, that across the state and probably across the country is a delicate dance. Everyone, not everyone, but this idea that growth pays for growth, it resonates, and it's true. We don't have the luxury. Parks, frankly, can wait, but our services can't. And so oftentimes we do have to pay for that up front. And to the extent that it's that it's solely funded by those new customers versus, frankly, subsidized by existing ratepayers, that's really a policy call, and it's across the board, across the region. I remember when we were having the SDC conversations last time. I wasn't directly involved with it, but I was there, and the question came up: well, what does Washington County charge? We want to be in the ballpark with them so that we can compete with them for development, for business. And so there is that delicate balance. I wouldn't want your job.
So, couple of things. How do we assess SDCs for a house? Is it how many bathrooms they have?
Well, for a typical house, so we charge, it's called an equivalent dwelling unit. And so for a house, which is, and it doesn't matter really if it's a one-bedroom house or a four-bedroom house, it's one EDU. That's 2.5 people, and that's our unit of measure, so to speak. And so if a Fred Meyer comes in, actually Fred Meyer did come in, I think in Happy Valley, we charge that 50 equivalent dwelling units. So they would charge the single rate times 50 for that. It's
So
based on use.
the reason I ask is one of the things that folks are talking about in Portland is that I think they're called EDUs.
ADUs.
Huh?
Equivalent or accessory dwelling units.
Yes,
Yeah.
that, you might have a $13,000 bill to hook up
Exactly.
to the sewer for a tiny home. And consequently, folks are looking at them and then withdrawing their application because of all the system development fees besides parks and all those other things.
That's
have-
very, I'm glad that you brought that up because part of our budget, there was a significant amount of money set aside for the revision of our rules and regulations, which have not been revised since, in some areas, since the 70s. And so not only do we not have an elegant or appropriate way of accounting for an accessory dwelling unit or a tiny house, we had to kind of torture ourselves when things like Starbucks came on into the fore. When our rules were written, that didn't exist. And so, bringing our rules and regulations up to what we're actually seeing out there in our service area is going to be an important piece of that, whether it's an ADU, a tiny house, or a Starbucks.
Just send everybody a punch card they can send back and you can run through your punch card reader.
Yeah, right.
That's before
technology
computers.
involved.
One thing that we did in the city of Milwaukee is we had a utility commission that actually went through every utility we had and decided what the rates would be using comparisons with other communities and all those and the cost of actually providing the service.
Doug and I
think
meet with them every year.
Pardon?
Doug and I meet with them every year in Milwaukee.
Because, and that was great. And they meet more than once a year. But, one of the comments was that, the involvement that the budget committees have is sometimes just once a year when our larger budget committee meets quarterly. Whether or not you would need that much, I don't know, or whether the utility commission model's the best, or when the new district is formed and it's made up majority of the people who are actually paying the bill, not the people who are collecting the bills. Those kind of discussions need to be made. But other than that,
Just quickly on that note, when I became the director, we've known about this issue, and so we started inviting the budget committee members to our regular advisory committee meetings. Unfortunately, we sunsetted those with the formation of the 190, so we haven't had those for some number of months. But that was one way that we were trying to get the budget committee folks more engaged and involved in what we're doing. And how that translates moving forward, we are going to be coming to the board in late July with a proposal for an advisory committee structure moving forward. And I think that it would make some sense. I'm not saying it's a foregone conclusion, but to have a future budget committee be a subset of those folks that are on the standing advisory committee so that we have that baked in kind of touch points and interaction.
Yeah, one last thing, Greg, because it's been brought up, it was brought up the other night, last week by a council member from another city. And that is talking about the rates of SDC. So let me just ask you this. I think the answer, nobody knows the answer, but just, you'll get my point when I ask the question. Is the SDC and SD, or Service District Number 1, the same for a 2-bedroom home as it is a 5-bedroom home?
Yes.
I think his point was that that's not fair.
And it's the same for a tiny home as it is for a 5-bedroom home.
Unless, right, we haven't actually looked into the tiny home issue, but as far as I understand, we don't have any way to make an accommodation for that. It's just not in our rules and regs. We would have, yeah.
It's a policy issue.
So, Mr. Chairman, real quick, is there anything that would legally prevent us from having differential rates?
No.
Thank you.
One more question or comment here.
Well, I'll just make The SDC, as I understand, the EDU is based on a dwelling unit, all right? That's what an equivalent level dwelling unit. You know, your monthly bill is based on your water usage, and that's really what we're talking about.
Actually, ours isn't. We're fairly unique regionally and probably across the state. An EDU is essentially a proxy for amount of flow and a strength of that waste from a typical household. And so we don't, and I think probably it originated with the origination of the districts. And probably because we have such a variety of water providers, trying to get all that information from 9 or 10 different water providers would be
Okay.
challenging. But no, we don't base our charges on flow.
stand
Except
corrected
for
then.
our large industrial users where we actually have flow meters installed.
Would you say that would be a better way to run the rate system?
I think, I don't know.
Okay.
It would be harder, and it would probably be more precise, but whether it would, but I don't know.
I would just add quickly, much of your cost in this business is fixed. You know, we have to have the lights on and the chemicals ready and the employees ready, whether or not people are using the system or not. So, I mean, it's sort of a very steady state of affairs. And so there is some variability, but not as much as you might think in terms of consumption.
Yeah, to me, it's a precision versus accuracy kind of question. It would be very precise, but are we already accurate, and do we need that level of precision?
Okay, I think that is all the questions and discussions, and if so, I would call for a motion.
Who's got the
Who's got the motion?
Who's got the
second?
motion?
I'll find it.
Don's got the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee approve the 2017-2018 budget for the Clackamas County Service District Number 1 as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the budget is approved by this committee. Thank you for your work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we will adjourn this committee.